Hey guys, as we wind down tonight, we step softly into a world where laughter could save you, or finish you. You are in the 12th century. There is no Wi-Fi, no sofa, and certainly no law protecting the freedom of speech for artists. There is only one thing allowed to pass through every castle gate, every banquet dripping with goose fat. A song good enough to make a duke laugh so hard he forgets. He personally beheaded the steward just yesterday. And the one who carries this weapon does not ride a steel horse, nor wear silver armor. He is just a wanderer with a lute. A troubadour. You may not survive this. Not because the tale is terrifying, but because, if you happen to laugh aloud at the wrong moment, in front of the wrong person, your neck might find itself relocated to a willow basket by morning. But don't worry. Before we gather around tonight's quiet fire of memory, take a moment to like this video, and subscribe if you truly wish to journey with these strange tales. And as always, leave a comment to tell me, where are you listening from and what time is it for you right now? It's always amusing to know someone is drifting off to history at 3 in the morning. So, are you ready? Dim your screen, set a small fan for a gentle background hum, and together we'll begin to drift into tonight's tale. Medieval troubadours, the power of laughter. Laughter. A thin thread stretched between survival and disaster. And sometimes, the only thing that makes this world feel a little less meaningless. Now, soften the glow, set a gentle breeze in motion, and let's drift into tonight's tale together. Chapter 1. A day in the life of a troubadour. It's not just singing. You open your eyes, not because you want to, but because sunlight, streaming through a hole in the inn's roof, is shining straight into your eyes, as if a small, stubborn sun god is trying to burn you alive. You lie on a wooden board. You could call it a bed, if you accept that. A plank of wood can welcome you with a chorus of creaks every time you breathe too hard. There's straw, there's a blanket, and there's a smell. Unclear whether it comes from the blanket, the straw, or you. You are a troubadour, a poet, a musician, a wanderer, someone who makes a living by making people laugh. People who could easily make sure you never live again if they don't laugh. Today, you have a performance. In the castle of a lord known as a man of great humor, until he isn't. You wrote a new song last night, by candlelight, under the judgmental gaze of a rat the size of your calf. You sit up. Your head hums. Your mouth is as dry as a cracked clay bowl. That is what happens when you sample too much mead the night before, in a tavern called the rather poetic name of the Three-Legged Dog. You search your cloth pouch. A broken comb, a spare lute string, a silver coin, or perhaps tin-plated, and a handful of aromatic herbs, meant for cleaning your teeth. You smirk. The herbs smell like they were once home to a very discerning worm. You tighten the strings, your lute, your most loyal companion. The second is your rented horse, and this morning, it looked at you as if to say, "No, I'm not carrying another penniless bard today." You set out. The road from the inn to the castle is long, muddy, and full of surprises. Like the wild goose that chased you for nearly 100 meters, just because you looked at it the wrong way. You reach the castle gate. The guard looks you up and down. You smile, politely. The proper troubadour mix of humility and defiance. He nods, only after making sure your lute hides no sword, no bow, and no smuggled bread. Inside, the great hall is being prepared. Long tables, a chandelier of candles large as an upside-down beehive. The guests haven't arrived. The cook is shouting at a young boy for burning the wine sauce. You wait, drinking cold water. Definitely cold because it tastes like secrets you'd rather not know. You overhear the servants whisper, "The Duke is not in a good mood today. Be careful." You smile. Nothing new. Your job is to make unhappy people forget their unhappiness. For at least 15 minutes, the performance begins. You step forward. Every eye turns to you. The only one in the room without a gold chain, without a feathered hat, and without fresh blood on their boots. You strum the lute. The first note rings out, slightly off. You adjust quickly, Smile. My lute too is a little nervous to meet you all today. The room chuckles, a light laugh, but the first laugh. Which means you still have a chance to survive the performance. You begin to sing. A song about an old count in love with a young maiden, who unbeknownst to him, loves the kitchen boy. A merry tune, playful lyrics. Every time you emphasize the line, and love, like stew, should not be oversalted, someone nearly falls off their chair laughing. You do not look directly at the Duke, only glance briefly. Just enough to see him smirking. The kind of smile from a man who has executed 3 people for not making him laugh enough. You end with a lilting flourish. Bow. Silence. 1 beat. 2 beats. Then, applause. You exhale. Lightly. Tonight, you will get to eat dinner. And tomorrow morning, your head will still be attached to your shoulders. You return to the small artist's table. A servant brings you a cloudy beer. You sip it. It tastes like a sponge once soaked in a pond with 3 dead fish. You smile. You have survived another day. That is a day in the life of a troubadour. It is not just singing. It is reading the room. Weighing each note like a razor on a thread. It is knowing when to smile and when to stay silent the moment the song ends. You lean against the wall. Outside, the wind brushes past the castle walls. You close your eyes. Think of the next song, and quietly hope that tomorrow, laughter will still be strong enough to keep your head where it belongs. Chapter 2. Cervantes, the art of public insult in song. You think medieval songs were only about love, roses, and knights gleaming under the moonlight. No, not at all. They were also about fools, greedy kings, plump bishops, and cuckolded husbands, all told in rhyme, with just enough charm that sometimes the very target of the insult would laugh along. That is the Cervantes, a type of song, not wise to sing after more than 3 cups of wine, or before signing a lease with the local lord. You, a troubadour, know you cannot survive on love songs alone. No one can sing about eyes sparkling like the Loire in flood season, every day without going mad. Sometimes you need to say it plainly. My lord, you ride a horse like a catfish crawling through sand. But how do you say that, and still be able to sit for breakfast the next morning? That is the art. You sit in a tavern, fingers strumming the lute. An idea flickers. A new song, a Cervantes, a public biting song. A genre that, if done well, makes people blush and clap. If done poorly, well, you may find yourself hanging as festive decoration. You know that Cervantes follows no fixed formula. It can be absurd flirtation, political satire, personal accusation, and if you truly want to impress, you must weave in just enough insult to make the audience feel clever, but not enough to earn yourself a summons. You remember once hearing a fellow troubadour, Pere, whose voice could insult while sounding as sweet as honey. He once sang before a bishop, "Sir, your new cloak, costing 3 fine cows, yet barely covers half your belly." The hall burst into laughter, and the bishop, face red as an overripe tomato, still laughed, because if he hadn't, they would have called him humorless. A greater sin at a spring festival than at a winter fair. You learned that when writing Cervantes, a few rules are worth remembering. Do not insult those with armed guards beside them. Do not insult the keeper of the wine cellar, and never insult the lord's wife, unless she invites you to do so herself. This time, you choose a safer target, the royal cook's stew. The cook, a man with a beard like a crow's nest, who always smiles as if to say, "I know my stew is dreadful, but I also know who tastes the Duke's wine for poison." You test a few lines before your fellow musicians. Your stew, bold as rainwater, carrots adrift like rudderless boats, and all who eat it pray to reach the privy in time. Laughter erupts. You are pleased. But you know, tonight, you must be careful. If the cook laughs, good. If the cook reaches for a knife, run. Such is Cervantes. A battle of wits, A tightrope dance where you balance courage and survival instinct. You recall another troubadour, Guihem. He was reckless. He once began a song with the line, "My lord's head shines like an egg, and his mind half-hatched." The result? He was banished from the kingdom. And since then, troubadours have a saying, "Better wise than bold when you sing." You continue refining your lyrics. You know that laughter is a weapon. When one cannot speak plainly, they laugh. When they cannot curse, they sing. And when they cannot change the world, they write Cervantes. You think of tonight's audience, those seated high in gold-stitched cloaks, eager to hear words they dare not speak themselves. You, the troubadour, will speak for them, within reason. Night falls. You step onto the stage, a creaky wooden platform. Candles flicker. You begin to sing, each line a needle pricking the down of the mighty. Laughter rises. You see the Duke nod, ever so slightly. And the cook laughs heartily, thumping the table. You exhale. A successful night. A Cervantes sharp enough to be remembered, subtle enough to keep you alive come morning. You sit in the corner, sip warm beer, and think. Sometimes, laughter is the best shield, and a good song might protect your neck longer than any spear. You close your eyes. Outside, the wind stirs across the fields. Inside, laughter lingers still. You smile. Tomorrow, perhaps, there will be a new song. And another game upon the rope. Chapter 3. Laughing over the noble's rotten table. You have another performance tonight. The castle is full of guests. Very full. All kinds of hats. All kinds of feathers. All kinds of scents that really should fight each other first before reaching your nose. But you're used to it. A noble's feast is not a place where people come to eat. It is a place to sit, to look at each other, to say many words that mean very little, and occasionally to laugh. And laughing, that is the hard part. Not genuine laughter, but the right kind, the right length, the right intensity. Laugh too long, they think you're a fool. Too short, they think you're mocking. Don't laugh at all, and they may think you're plotting something. And in a castle, everyone is plotting something. You enter the great hall. The long oak table, once a proud giant in the forest, now bows like the back of an old man waiting in vain for someone to pour him wine. On top, a forest of golden goblets, silver knives, chipped ceramic plates, and piles of food trying to survive a few more minutes under the assault of knives, forks, and fingers. You notice a roasted chicken lying askew, its head turned toward a count whose belly rivals a wine barrel. They stare at each other. Neither wins. You are invited to perform after the first course. The first course tonight is a fish looking at you, as if it still isn't sure whether it's dead. You avoid its gaze. Not out of fear, but because a wise troubadour knows. Never make eye contact with the food of those about to hear you sing. You wait. The guests eat. Wine is poured. Toasts ring out like frogs croaking at dusk. And when stomachs begin to swell, when heads grow a little light, when guards are lowered, that is when you step forward. You hold your lute, gently, unhurried. Smile, as though you came not to sing, but to share an old tale, one that only the truly clever will understand. You begin with a soft tune, a song about a count who loved a nun whose eyes could see straight through his purse. The hall hums. A lady covers her mouth with a fan. Her eyes sparkle, but not from sentiment. A knight chuckles like a broken millstone. You continue, each line heavier than the last. Love knows no class, unless the purse is light. Louder laughter. You glance at the fat count. He is laughing, but the kind of laugh from a man who once had 3 cooks executed for bland soup. You shift smoothly, change the tune. A lighter song. About a prince who loves hunting boar but always misses his mark, forcing the servants to buy pigs from the market and release them into the forest each night. The hall roars, and in that moment you know, this rotten table can bear one more round of laughter. But you also know, in the castle, laughter has a price. Each laugh is weighed like gold. A duchess may laugh but not smear her lipstick. A knight may pound the table, but never spill his wine. for wine costs more than the lives of a dozen peasants outside. You finish the song. At the final note, you bow. 1 breath. 2. The air stretches tight, like the lute string you once snapped in front of a lady duchess, and had to flee the castle by night. Then, applause. You exhale. You return to your corner. On the table, a slice of cold meat lies like evidence from a case no one dares to solve. You sip your beer, quietly. Laughter in a castle is like that, never entirely real. Like the silk flowers on the feast table. Beautiful, but scentless, you understand. A troubadour does more than sing. You must read people. Know when laughter is true, when it is a shield, and when it is a sign you should finish quickly, and leave the stage. You glance around. Red faces, eyes gleaming with wine, and schemes. You smile. Tonight you have survived the noble's rotten table. A table wobbly enough to remind you. Laughter, like the life of a troubadour, can snap at any moment. You rise, head toward the door. Outside the night is still young, and you still have many songs to sing. But first, a bowl of thin soup, and a warm corner in some quiet tavern. There, at least, the laughter will be real. And if not, you still have a Cervantes ready. Chapter 4. Troubadours, women who laughed so they would not be buried. You think being a troubadour was a man's game. Men wandering, singing love songs, mocking nobles, then fleeing when the laughter faded. Not quite. The world was more complicated than that. In castles where men wore cloaks heavier than their conscience, and women were expected to be virtuous, humble, quiet, and certainly not skilled with an instrument, some women still stepped forward and sang. They were called Troubadours. It sounds like the name of a pastry with a surprise filling, but no, they were poets, musicians, and, to put it plainly, women who knew how to smile when smiling was the closest thing to rebellion they could manage without getting hanged. Picture it. A woman, layered in skirts like a cabbage in winter, wooden shoes, veiled head, stepping onto a stage, one that was never meant for her. Men raise eyebrows, women hold their breath, and she begins. A song. Not "I love thee, brave knight upon thy white steed," but "How he rides," though not the horse. You feel the air shift. Ladies giggle behind their fans. Gentlemen pretend to adjust their goblets to hide their grins. Troubadours did more than sing. They peeled away masks. They used laughter to say things even the boldest men would think thrice before uttering. A biting Cervantes mocking the well-fed bishops. A clever Tenso outwitting a lecherous lord. An Alba about secret love, sung in a hall full of nobles. Troubadours were no fools. They knew. Every lyric was a step across thin ice. Sing well, and be celebrated. Sing wrong, and you might find yourself sent to live with an ant. No one asked why this ant never appeared in the family tree. You remember hearing a piece by Comtesse de Dia. A verse went like this. He promised to return before the full moon, but fine wine and strange girls slowed him more than I'd thought. I do not blame him. I only hope he returns with his trousers intact. You nearly choked on your wine. The hall erupted in laughter. Even her husband, a count red as a pickled tomato, had to laugh, because not laughing would suggest he missed the point. And at a feast, missing the point was worse than missing a woman's heart. You understand that. For women then, laughter was an act of courage. In a world where they were expected to be silent when their husbands spoke, blush when love was mentioned, and feign sleep when their husbands sang poorly. To stand in a hall and sing a biting song about their own husbands was a declaration that they were still human, not walking vases. You once met a Troubadours. Her name was Beatrice. She told you, singing well is one thing. Knowing what to sing, and for whom, that is survival. She shared that sometimes she wrote 2 versions of a song, one to perform when the lady of the house was present, one to perform when the lady was not, but her husband was. And knowing when to switch was a skill more vital than perfect pitch. You reflect. For men then, laughter softened the air. For women, it was a key. A careful smile could earn another invitation to sing. A good song could secure a place in stories told over wine. But one misplaced laugh could erase them entirely, like smoke after a feast. You know this, and you respect the Troubadours all the more. They did not laugh to live more easily. They laughed to live at all. That night, you return to the inn. The wind outside is cold as thin broth. You lie on your old wooden board, thinking of the women who dared to laugh in a world determined to silence them. And you drift to sleep, a small smile on your lips. Because sometimes, laughter is the strongest weapon a person can wield without having it taken away. Chapter 5. Laughter before the Bishop. You once thought laughter was harmless, a pleasant instinct, a natural reaction to a good joke. Wrong. In the Middle Ages, laughter required permission, and laughing before a bishop, that was performance art, advanced level, with a risk of losing your head. You are sitting in a cold hall, hands resting on your lute, the air thick with incense, mingled with the smell of melting wax and more than a little human odor. Before you sits the bishop, shepherd of the entire region, a man who can grant you absolution or have you handed over to the guards for impertinence in music. You know that tonight you must sing and make people laugh. But making the bishop laugh is another matter. A joke too crude, you are deemed vulgar. A religious jest, you are branded a heretic. A misplaced emphasis, you may end up hanging like a snapped lute string. So, how does one laugh properly before a bishop? You have learned. Bishops were not always joyless. Some enjoyed humor, provided it avoided three sacred topics: the church's wealth, and the bishop's secret lovers. You know that tonight's song tells of an old farmer wiser than three priests combined. A harmless tale. Yet you know. Harmlessness lies in how you look when you sing. You begin. Softly, like a whisper. One line. Then another. The shepherd old, who cannot read nor write, yet knows the parish wine is sweetest in sight. A ripple of laughter stirs the hall. You glance at the bishop. He smirks, half amused, half warning not to push further. You continue, shaping the story so it seems to praise the wisdom of the common folk, not the folly of the clergy. The bishop said, "Faith must remain pure." The old man replied, "And so must the glass for wine endure." Soft chuckles. You hear a lady stifling a giggle. You also hear the bishop's scribe's pen, poised to record any word that might cause a frown. You tread carefully. A pause. A line. No more. That is the art of singing before a bishop, keeping the string of laughter taut, without letting it snap. You once witnessed another troubadour, Arnaud, less fortunate. He sang a song mocking the trade in false relics. The hall roared with laughter. The bishop did not. The next day, Arnaud was summoned to clarify his lyrics. He emerged wearing a fool's collar, with a vow never to sing near a church again. You do not wish to be Arnaud, so you sing your final verse, a safe ending. The old man bowed before the bishop. "I shall keep my faith, and my small bottle too." Laughter fills the room. You glance. The bishop smiles faintly. That is enough. You bow, step back. Each movement slow, as if you had not just walked away from a silent battlefield of words. You sit in the corner, a mug of flat ale in your hand. You sip, its taste as thin as a tax collector's promise of reform. You think, laughter before a bishop is no joy. It is a test, a blade. Each smile is a step along that blade. And tonight, I remain uncut. You have survived the evening, yet you know, the laughter behind one's back can be more dangerous than the laughter before the bishop. For a poor jest may be forgiven, but a brilliant one often is not. You lean back against the cold stone wall. Close your eyes. Laughter still echoes in your mind. You know, tomorrow brings another performance, and how much laughter is enough? remains a question no one has ever answered. Chapter 6. Laughing in the Tavern, a night no one remembers. There are places in your world, as a troubadour, where laughter feels more real than anywhere else. Not in a grand hall, not at a count's festival, and certainly not at a banquet where a bishop frowns with a scribe at his side. No, it is the tavern. Wooden walls stained with time, dim candlelight, a floor that creaks even when no one walks on it. A place where laughter is the last thing left whole, after one has sold their pride, their new boots, and sometimes even their chicken. You know this well. A troubadour does not sing only in castles. You must sing in taverns, to test new songs, to test the crowd, and to test your own drinking. You push open the door of the one-eyed dog. The door groans like an old man with a bad back. The air inside is thick, like porridge left too long over the fire. A wall of scent hits you. Ale, sweat, roast chicken, damp feet, pipe smoke, and one smell. You choose not to question, for some questions should not be answered. You see flushed faces, heads swaying, smiles that do not care what day it is. You choose a seat near the hearth. An old man sits there, beard reaching his chest. He chuckles alone, gazing into his cup as if it tells him jokes. You pluck your lute. A few heads turn. A few do not, busy fishing sausages from their ale. You begin, softly. No need for biting satire. No need for clever technique. Here, a song about a lazy farm boy is enough to set the room roaring. You sing, "He called her to the old oak tree, but drunk he was, too weak to flee. She hauled him home instead, you see, and from then on, met 'neath the bed's canopy." The tavern explodes with laughter. You are not sure whether it is the song, or the drunk man rolling under the table who looks just like the boy in the tale. You continue. Another song. About the stingy innkeeper who pours beer with a ladle full of holes. More laughter. You glance around, eyes gleaming brighter than the oil lamps. In that moment you realize, here the laughter is true. Not meant to flatter, not meant to survive a political dinner, but to forget how many coins are left for firewood, to forget winter is near, to forget the backache from digging earth. You recall an old farmer once told you, after a song, "A laugh like this might just buy me one more season." You are not sure laughter adds years, but it does make the living easier. You finish, sit down, a cloudy mug of beer before you. You sip. It tastes as if someone forgot to clean the barrel, all season. But drinking is better than thinking. A serving girl brings more ale. She looks at you, smiles. "Lovely singing, troubadour." You smile back, softly. For an experienced troubadour knows, in a tavern, smiling too much may cost you coin or shoes. You hear a drunk man slump over the table, mumbling, "He sings well, but less of it now so I can sleep." You chuckle, thinking, in a tavern, the song that lets them sleep is the truest success. For when they sleep, they forget what they wish they could not remember. And that too is what a troubadour should do. The night passes. You rise, lute on your back. Step out of the one-eyed dog. The late wind cuts like well water. You pull your collar high. A smile still lingers. For somewhere in that tavern, laughter still lingers too. Among scratched tables, among cracked mugs, among slumbering patrons who need no dreams. You walk on. For tomorrow there will be another tavern, another night. Other faces, and more laughter. Simple, rough, but the truest of all. Chapter 7. Laughing in the Tavern, a night no one remembers. There are places in a troubadour's life where laughter rings out, without hesitation. No need to wait for the Duke to laugh first. No need to mind the bishop's gaze. Just laugh. Laugh freely. Laugh now. Then forget. That place is the tavern. You have performed in many. From those with a proper signboard, the one-eyed dog, to places with no sign at all. Just a rag hung on a wooden post. A secret for those who know where to enter. You know this well. In here, the tavern keeps no memories. No one wants to be reminded the next morning of why they laughed, with whom, or in what condition. You once pushed open the door of such a place. Inside, laughter hung as thick as pipe smoke. The air dense as a stew left simmering for 3 days. You had barely set your lute down when an old man called out, "Sing something that makes me forget I owe the innkeeper for this round." You smiled, of course. In the tavern, no need for subtle metaphors as in the great hall. No need to measure laughter as you would before a bishop. Here, you can sing plainly. The blacksmith went to wed his bride, but drank too much and swayed with pride. At the wedding, he forgot to stand. The bride held him and claimed his hand. The room erupted. A chair toppled. A dog barked along. You knew. You were in tune with the tavern. You have learned. The tavern is the place where a song is truly tested. If one here makes them laugh so hard they spill ale on each other, then when sung in a castle, you simply remove 2/3 of the jokes. You have witnessed nights no one remembers. Like the time you sang The Fishmonger and His 3 Wives. One verse went, "The first wife cheats the scales with flair. The second counts the coins with care. The third counts her lovers rare, while he counts nothing there." The tavern burst like a marketplace in uproar. An old man gripped your shoulder. "Sing it again. I'll tell it to my daughter-in-law." You knew. By morning, he would forget he had a daughter-in-law. Or forget who sang the song. Or forget what tale he was telling. And so the night passed. A night no one would recall. But the laughter lingered. In the drunken haze, in the sleep beneath the tables. You have sung at midnight, wind howling through the cracks. You sang The Farmer and His New Trousers. Bought new trousers for the fair, wore them, forgot the thread's still there. At the market, folk would stare, while he thought he looked debonair. Before you finished, someone shouted, "He's singing about me!" then collapsed in laughter. You didn't ask if it was true. In the tavern, anything can be true or false, depending on the ale. You realize, in the tavern, they laugh at you, at the song, and at the parts of their own lives they recognize in your words. And so the laughter here is more honest than any applause in the great hall. But you also learn, the tavern is a place to laugh and forget, not to remember. You once saw a man cry during a funny song. Someone asked, "Why cry?" He answered, "Because I can still laugh." You understand. Sometimes laughter is the bravest thing to do when the soul is weary. You once heard Goyhem say, "The tavern is the best school for a singer. If you make them laugh while drunk, they'll invite you back when sober. If your laughter is false, they'll throw shoes." You remember, and each night you mind your words with more care. You once sang The Stingy Innkeeper, of how he poured ale through a sieve. Laughter echoed, but you watched. Did the innkeeper laugh? If not, tomorrow you would have no seat here. You understand? In the tavern, laughter is a soft currency. Spent wisely, you'll always have a seat and a stage. Spent poorly, you'll sing to the rats in the back. You step out after nights like this, the air cold, ale clinging to you like an invisible cloak. You know, no one will remember who sang what. But the laughter bound them together in this cold world. One more night, a little more warmth, one more reason to open the tavern tomorrow. You smile. For in this wandering life, a night with laughter is a good night. Even if by morning, you may not remember how many songs you sang. Chapter 8. Tales of Forbidden Jokes. There are things a troubadour must know. What to sing aloud, and what to keep inside one's head. You know this well. And you know that the most dangerous joke is not the bad one. It is the one that is too true. A true joke makes faces flush, makes people glance around, makes them laugh, then pretend they never did. And after that, the joke vanishes. You have heard many such tales. Songs once sung across taverns, once bright at fairs, once making counts pound the table, choking on their wine, then gone. Gone faster than a knight galloping home upon hearing his wife has returned to the village. You remember one story clearly. The Song of the Monk and the Golden Chest. A song about a very devout monk. So devout that every donation made him think, keeping gold to bargain with the Lord is, in its way, serving the Lord. A merry song, witty words, a light tune. But the ending, too clever. And when he died, chest in hand, the Lord said, "You come with empty palms. Your gold, the monks below, they now command." You first heard it in a tavern. The room rolled with laughter. One man clapped so hard, he broke the handle off his mug. Then, a week later, no one sang it again. You asked. They only shrugged, voices low. Someone sang it outside the abbey. That man, a young, fiery troubadour, disappeared after. No one knows where. Only that his horse was later sold to the inn for less than half a barrel of beer. You understand, some jokes strike a nerve, and that nerve does not sound like do or me. It sounds like off with his head. There was another tale, the Song of the Count's 4 Wives. A wildly popular song, telling of a rich count with 4 wives. Not all at once, but one after the other. And the song described each wife, in ways rather too familiar. Until the final verse rang out. And the 4th, in gown of green, sits at the end of the table serene, loves her music, loves her wine, and happens to sit here tonight. You know what happened. The Countess wore a green gown, sat at the table's end, and, yes, loved her music. The hall fell silent. No one laughed. The next day, that song vanished from all gatherings. Those who tried to sing it were barred. Those who spoke of it were looked at as if they had spilled wine in the holy chalice. You think on this. Laughter works that way. If it touches just right, it delights. But if it cuts too deep, it reveals things best left unseen. An old troubadour once told you, "Forbidden tales are not false. They are true. Truer than people can bear." You nodded. And ever since, each time you write a new song, you ask yourself, shall I leave this last note, or save it for the tavern, where no one remembers come morning? There are songs like that. They live in whispers, passed from voice to voice, sung only when there is room to run, should one need. You have tried it once. One night, in a small tavern, you sang the bishop's broken goblets. The crowd roared. You saw tears wiped from cheeks. But you also saw, in one shadowed corner, someone pulling their cloak close, quietly leaving. You never sang that song again, and never asked who they were. You have learned something vital. Not every joke belongs in a written scroll. Some are meant only for the night, and should fade like smoke with the dawn. You step out of the tavern, the night cold. You know, tonight, you sang well. But also know, a joke too sharp can cut the teller. You remind yourself, sing to make them laugh, but sing so that you may sing again tomorrow. And you walk on. In your ear, tonight's laughter still lingers. But perhaps tomorrow, no one will speak of it. Chapter 9. The world behind the troubadour. Laughter behind the curtain. You might think a troubadour is someone who always sings perfectly, plays flawlessly, enters a room to the hush of an expectant hall. No, not at all. Behind every polished song, every clever smile, every well-timed chord, lies a backstage that, if you could see it, might leave you laughing until your sides ache, or crying, depending on the night. You know this well. You have been in that world, the world behind those who live by laughter. There are no glowing candles here, no fine wine, no applause, only stories as dirty as the cloth used to wipe your lute after the show. You remember once, before a grand banquet, 4 troubadours gathered in a waiting room no bigger than a moldy flower closet. In that room were a lute missing 2 strings, a flute chewed at the tip by rats, a drum patched with old boot leather, and 4 faces, pale and worn, as if they had just performed at 3 taverns in one night, and sampled the worst ale at each. You asked, what song first? An old troubadour named Guihem gave a dry chuckle. Start with a song that makes them laugh early, so when they stop laughing, you're already done. You smiled. A survival rule. Then they shared stories only troubadours dare tell one another. Like the time Arnaud, a brilliant player with a reckless mouth, once flirted with a lady through a new song. Unaware her husband sat just 3 seats away. The song began. The fair one at the table's end, her smile like jasmine in spring. By the second line the husband stood, sword drawn. Arnaud swiftly changed key, adding a line, and her lord, whose presence shines brighter than any bloom. The hall erupted, sword sheathed. Arnaud lived another night. Or the time Bertrand, who loved testing new songs, sang about a duke's famous fall from his horse. The tale was true, and the duke was present. Bertrand sang, and he fell like ripe fruit, his steed rejoicing at sudden leave. Guess what happened? The duke laughed heartily, because secrets, when sung well, are easier to swallow. But not every night ends well. You heard of a young troubadour, Ramon. He mocked the bishop's belly. The next day, he was banned across the region. Lost his contracts. Lost his reputation. Nearly lost his loot, too, had he not traded it, just in time, for a chicken. You look around. Behind every written song are dozens of last-minute edits, changing belly like a barrel to belly like a full moon, turning the forgetful old count into the wise and seasoned count, all to preserve life and reputation. You know well, the best singer is not the one who reaches the highest note. It is the one who reads the room best. You have seen a seasoned troubadour stand before a feast, scan the tables. If the nobles above argued, he chose a gentle tune. If the crowd below was deep in drink, he picked a short, merry song. If the bishop was present, he skipped wine sweeter than scripture, and so survived the night. You learn. Learn to laugh backstage when a fellow troubadour takes a risky step. Learn to pat a friend's back when they nearly offend a noble lady. And most of all, learn when to keep your mouth shut. For some jokes belong only backstage, among those who understand that laughter is a weapon, but also a double-edged blade. You rise. The night begins. Another performance awaits. You tune your lute. Remember the tales you just heard. And remind yourself, tonight, make them laugh. But never let your tale become another's cautionary song. You step out of the waiting room. Beyond, the clink of glasses fills the hall. You know, tonight is another show. The songsmiths. But behind every note, behind every smile, lingers the unseen laughter of a world no audience ever sees. Chapter 10. The place of one who knows when to laugh in feudal society. You might think, in a world filled with war, plague, taxes, and nobles whose beards were groomed with the finest almond oil, laughter would be the last thing worth learning. But you would be wrong. In feudal society, knowing when to laugh could determine whether you received an extra pastry at dinner or an extra rope around your neck. You know this well. A troubadour does not simply sing well. They must know how to laugh. And, more importantly, when to laugh. You have seen it happen. A count rises, lifts his goblet, and tells a story so dull that even the weakest wine on the table seems full-bodied in comparison. Yet, the entire hall bursts into laughter, a perfectly timed chorus, as if they had rehearsed. You know this is necessary laughter. A laugh serving the same purpose as a wedge beneath a wobbly chair. To keep the chair, or in this case one's head, steady. You learn. You observe. At every banquet, there are 3 types of people. Those who laugh too soon, always the first to shriek before the tale ends. Their fate, deemed foolish or sycophantic. Those who laugh too late, chuckling when the storyteller is already sipping his wine. Their fate, seen as slow or provocative. And those who laugh just enough, at just the right moment, with volume neither overpowering the count nor too faint to signal the rest. That is whom you should emulate. A person whose place is secure, Not by land, soldiers, or beard, but by ears that hear well, eyes that see far, and a mouth that knows when to laugh. You once asked an old troubadour, Guihem, how he had survived 30 years through changing dukes. He smiled faintly and said, "Laughter is a kind of currency. Spend too freely, it loses value. Spend it well, and you can buy both bread and your life." You remember this. You also know some have built entire careers on laughter alone. Not because they sang better than you, not because they were richer than you, but because they made others feel safe to laugh. Once, you witnessed Jacques, a troubadour no bigger than a teapot, stand in a grand hall. He told a tale of a donkey who feigned death to avoid taxes. The room shook with laughter. The duke laughed. The bishop laughed. Even the gate guards laughed. But Jacques did not laugh. He merely smiled softly, bowed, and kept the balance of power in that room intact. For if the one who sparked the laughter laughs the loudest, they become the first target when sobriety returns. You learned another truth. Knowing when to let others claim the laughter is also an art of survival. In feudal society, where pride was gilded and egos as grand as peacock's plumes, laughter could be a weapon, a shield, or a noose, depending on how you used it. You remember once nearly falling into a trap yourself. At a banquet, a count told a tale of fox hunting. A story so dull that an actual fox might have dozed off. You heard forced laughter across the hall. You were about to join in, but then you caught the countess's eyes. She was not laughing. You stayed silent, merely smiling. The result, the next day, that very countess invited you to perform privately. And that day, the tale of hunting foxes was replaced by one of hunting, the hunter. You understand now. At every banquet, every performance, laughter is a kind of choreography. Like walking a tightrope. Laugh to build alliances. Laugh to ease the room. Laugh to conceal intent. And sometimes, laugh to prepare to run. You sigh, pick up your lute, ready for the next performance. You tell yourself, knowing when to laugh, in this world, is a skill no book will teach. But without it, no book will save you. You step out of the inn. Tonight, another feast awaits. More wobbly chairs, more selective laughter. You walk slowly. And inside, you wear a soft smile. Not from joy, but because you know that smile might keep your head on your shoulders for one more night. Chapter 11. Peasants who laughed through their teeth. You might think, in feudal society, only nobles knew how to laugh properly, to raise a goblet and release a soft, perfectly timed ha. No, peasants laughed too, and sometimes their laughter was the truest of all. They laughed through their teeth, because teeth were no longer plenty enough for a hearty laugh. You have wandered through many villages, places where your lute earned payment in the form of thin soup, a chunk of cheese as hard as paving stone, and the pitying gaze of the village cat. Yet, in such places, laughter felt warmer, rougher, and sometimes more dangerous. You still remember one visit to the village of Fond-de-Chêne, a small place, so small that if a pig went missing, the whole village would know by the time you finished your third chord. You sang at the tavern, a hut with so many gaps that when it rained, the patrons wore cloaks indoors as well. You had just finished a song, The Count and His Talking Horse. A light satire. An old farmer spoke up. If the Count's horse could talk, it would likely beg to stop carrying a backside as big as a millstone. The tavern burst with laughter. You couldn't hold back either. That is how peasants laughed. Rough, timely, without pretense. For those who have lived through winters without firewood, harvests that failed, taxes that emptied their bowls, patience for polished laughter wears thin. You have learned that peasants' humor takes a few forms. Mocking nobles, a count wobbling on horseback, a lady fainting from corsets laced too tight. All become fireside tales, mocking themselves. Lines like, "My plow is now thinner than a prayer page. One tug and it turns to dust." And laughing at the world. For whether you laugh or not, winter still comes. Best to laugh. You once heard an old woman speak of her late husband. He loved his drink, so much that, when he died, I had him buried with a bottle, so there'd be laughter beneath the ground. But that night, I dreamt I heard a gurgling sound. You never knew if the story was true, but her laugh, as she told it, was truer than any applause in a great hall. You understand. Peasants' laughter is not for display, not for flattery. It is to keep a shred of humanity in a life that squeezes it like an over-tightened pickle jar. Once you tried a gentle satire at a village feast, when you sang, "The Lord collects taxes each season yet forgets to pay for the last." The whole room laughed. No explanation needed. They lived that line every year. You watched the wrinkled smiles, the rough hands pounding the table, the bald heads glistening in candlelight, and you saw, here, laughter is no game. It is a way to stay human without turning to stone. Later, you sat by the hearth. An old man approached, eyes squinting, beard dipping into his beer like tangled weeds. He clapped your shoulder. "Good singing, lad. But remember, sing, then drink. Drink, then laugh. Laugh, then forget. And if you can't forget, sleep will not come easy." You nodded. A fine lesson. You took a sip. The beer tasted like rainwater caught from a cowshed roof. But somehow, in that moment, it felt warmly welcome. You knew, in this world, those who laugh through their teeth often understand life the best. And you, a troubadour, could only hope to learn such laughter. True, tough, and not meant for history books. Night fell. You curled by the hearth's dying embers. In your dreams, you still heard it. The rough chuckle of the old farmer. The laugh of one who knows. When laughter fades, silence can only bring tears. Chapter 12. Laughing through a bad song. You might think, every song a troubadour sings must be good. Rhymes in perfect time. Melodies flowing smooth. Words deep with meaning. No, not at all. Bad songs are part of the craft. And knowing how to laugh through a bad song is a more vital survival skill than tuning your lute. You have lived this. Who hasn't? One day you traveled to a distant town. The road was rough. The horse tired. You tired. And your lute made clicking noises like the joints of an old man. You arrived, were asked to perform a new song. A song you had not quite learned, but refusing would be worse. A bad song is better than a rumor that you are arrogant. You began. Halfway through, the words fled. You tried to recall, but all that came to mind was the chicken you'd had for lunch. You kept singing. The next line no longer fit the last. Your rhythm stumbled like a lame horse. One high note burst out, like an old man yawning at a council meeting. The room paused for a beat. Then a chuckle from one corner. It spread. You knew. Pride must go in your pocket now. You stopped, bowed, and said, "This is a test performance. The louder you laugh, the clearer I'll know where to fix it." The room laughed heartily, and you were spared. You understand this. If the song can't be saved, save the mood. A bad song, if handled well, can become its own entertainment. You remember old Guayhem once said, "A bad tune is like thin soup. To swallow it, you must laugh while you eat." And Guayhem had faced worse than you. One night he sang a tragic love song. Midway through the climax, twang, a string snapped. Silence followed. Guayhem calmly set the lute down, bowed and said, "My apologies." The string was too moved by the love, and took its leave. The room burst out laughing, and they remembered that song, not for its words, but for how he saved the moment. You learned too. Once, when your voice cracked at the final line, you stopped, smiled, and said, "When love runs too deep, even the throat rebels." The audience laughed, and forgot the crack. You see now, audiences don't hate a bad song. They hate when it's not acknowledged. If you dare to laugh first, they will laugh with you. But if you pretend nothing is wrong, they will see it all and laugh behind your back. You once heard of Ramon, a young troubadour, bold enough to sing a brand new song before the Duke. The first verse was offbeat, the second out of key, the third sounded like two songs sewn together. Ramon paled, but said nothing, pressed on, and the crowd began to laugh, not at the song, but at his stubborn effort. In the end, the Duke called him aside and said, "My boy, a bad song harms no one, but pretending it is good will ruin your name." Ramon learned. Next time, when he missed a beat, he said, "Today, the notes and lyrics had a quarrel yet to mend." You reflect. A bad song, if met with laughter, can save the whole night. But a bad song presented as a masterpiece can have you thrown out. In the life of a troubadour, this matters. When you perform 200 nights a year, not every night can be perfect. Some nights the strings loosen. Some nights the lute sounds warped. Some nights you yourself feel like old straw. But the audience, they remember how you handle such nights. You sigh, adjust your lute. Think of all the times you nearly turned a bad song into a truly bad one. You smile, a quiet smile, because you know, tonight, if a bad song surfaces, you are ready to laugh with it, not after it. And that is how a troubadour survives wrong notes and wrong nights. Chapter 13. Laughter across the lands. You might think, laughter is the same everywhere. A hearty ha-ha, a soft chuckle, a tumble off a chair. No, not at all. If you are a troubadour traveling across regions, you will know this well. Laughter, too, has its own soil, and jokes carry local accents more clearly than folk songs. You have wandered from the north to the south, from salt-sprayed coasts to valleys where the bray of donkeys echoes louder than the church bells. And you have learned. A joke that leaves one village in stitches may earn only polite smiles in another. Or worse, no smiles at all, just stares, as if you had sung the anthem wrong. You remember once in Provence, the people there favored subtle wit, light satire, a touch of poetry. You sang. The Count adored his poetry, wrote and wrote, then asked his wife to write for him. The room rang with laughter. An old, silver-bearded Count slapped his thigh. "That's poetry. That's true poetry." You breathed easier. But the same song, in a small mountain village. Silence. An old woman whispered, "Poetry is for prayer, not for jest." You quickly switched to a song about a wandering goat. Goat tales, thankfully, earn smiles everywhere. You learn. Coastal folk, they laugh quickly. They like fast-paced stories, rich with images. Mountain folk, they laugh slower. But once they do, they remember for days. Once you told a tale of a man who wore his hat backwards through an entire feast, unaware. They giggled for 3 whole days at the fair. As for the plains, richer lands bring richer laughter. They enjoy a gentle jab at power, wealth, or the highborn, but gentle only. If you poke too deep, you may soon need to sing how to run fast while carrying a heavy lute. You once foolishly tried a song called The Gambling Priest in a town right next to a monastery. You barely reached. He strums scripture as I strum strings, turns cards like I turn dried fish. When the air turned colder than midnight well water, you stopped, switched to The Lazy Rooster. Safer. Roosters. Don't file complaints. You also remember your first time down west, where there are more taverns than churches. There, the bawdier, the better. You tried a gentle love song. After the first line, an old man shouted, "Sing like that, and I'll never have grandkids." The room roared. You caught on, switched to The Village Girl and the Empty Barrel. That one had 13 puns. They laughed from line 3 through to the next round of drinks. You learned slowly. In every region, jokes mirror local life. In poor places, they laugh about poverty. In rich ones, about the fear of losing wealth. Near monasteries, laugh, but steer clear of the monastery. Near markets, laugh about who owes whom, who cheats whom on fish prices. You once heard Goyhem, the old troubadour, advise, "Remember, laughter is not for performance. It is for showing them you understand, and singing so they laugh without wanting to hit you. That is true skill. You absorbed this. Once, performing near the border where many were merchants. You tried this. The cloth seller's tongue is sweet as cane, but his scales tilt like midday rain. The room shook with laughter. You knew. You had struck gold, for this was a tale everyone knew. Everyone felt. Everyone wished they could say aloud. You think laughter is more than sound. It is a language of place. Know it, and you sing better, live longer, and leave with more. Cheese after the show. You stepped down from the stage. An old woman tugged your sleeve. That was fine laughter. Come sing again tomorrow. But mind, do not poke the baker. He is quick to anger. You nodded, and learned one more thing. Everywhere people laugh. But to laugh with them, you must listen, with both ears and heart. You stepped out of the tavern. Night wind brushed by. You smiled, for you knew. Tonight, you had laughed in tune with the land, and brought your loot home safely. Chapter 14. Laughing when you are a wanderer. You might think being a troubadour is a romantic life, waking in a castle, eating sweet pastries, singing by a window framed with flowers. No. You wake beneath a bridge. You eat bread. If someone left a scrap in your pocket the day before, and the only window you see is a hole in the tavern roof. Because when you are a wanderer, you know this well. Laughter is not just an art, it is armor, and sometimes your only ticket to the next meal. You have had such days. One night you performed at a small gathering, paid with 2 hugs from the innkeeper's wife and a promise. Next time I'll pay in full. The next morning, stomach empty, you wandered the market. You heard children giggling. One boy pointed at you. That man's lute has a broken string, but he still sings. You smiled, bowed, and replied, I sing from my belly, young one. The lute is full. I am not. The children laughed. An apple vendor heard this, smiled kindly, and tossed you an apple. You caught it, bowed as though receiving a crown from a queen. You understood. When you have nothing, laughter is the one thing you can still give. And sometimes, it earns you a meal. Once you passed through a small village. The people had never seen a troubadour. They looked at you as if you were some strange creature. This fellow carries a box that goes boing boing and expects to eat? You smiled, invited them to sit, and began a tale. Once there was a man so poor, he had to borrow a stick just to beg. Laughter followed. You added, he was so poor, even his dreams came with debt. The village burst into laughter. By the end, they brought out bread, cheese, a small bottle of wine. You ate, drank, and thanked your mouth for knowing when to smile. You learned. The poor laugh with more truth, but they are keen at spotting false smiles. If you stiffen, play the grand troubadour, they will look at you like a cat wearing a crown made from onion skins. But if you laugh first, laugh with them, and laugh at yourself, they will open their hearts. Once you met an old beggar. He heard you sing. The wife as tight as an old pickle jar. Husband returns from market with 3 sprigs of greens. The old man laughed until tears came, then pulled you close and said, Son, when you have nothing, laughter is the one thing untaxed. So keep singing. And you did. You laughed with him, with those like you, wanderers, living on laughter and hands not too tightly closed. You once slept in a stable, blanket, an old sack, pillow, your own knees. Morning came. The stable master grinned. Sleep well, artist? You answered, well enough. The horses snored louder than me. No thief dared enter. He laughed, handed you a scrap of cold bread. And you knew, a good line can warm you more than a fire. You realized a wandering troubadour needs 3 things. A lute, even if chipped. A belly, even if empty. And a mind quick to mock one's own hardships. Because if you cannot laugh when you eat bread hard as broken brick, sleep among rats competing for space, or sing while the crowd throws onions, not coins, then you will not have the strength to sing again tomorrow. You once heard Guillaume say, "Son, if you're a poor troubadour, best be a cheerful one." No one invites the sullen to sing again. You carved that into your heart. You know, as a wanderer, laughter is an invisible cloak against the cold, and a shield against the bitterness waiting at every bend in the road. Tonight, you sleep beneath a tavern eave. The sky is clear, stars bright. Beneath a thin blanket you smile. A wanderer still. But as long as my laugh outlasts my hunger, I'm fine. And you drift to sleep, dreaming of laughter. Rough, uneven, but truer than any applause in a grand hall. Chapter 15. The Audience. How to Laugh Safely. You might think, being an audience member at a Troubadours performance is simple. Sit, sip your wine, laugh when amused. But no, in the feudal world, laughing the wrong way was as dangerous as misquoting a prayer on Sunday. You have seen it often, and you know well. There are three kinds of listeners. Those who laugh at the right moment, in the right way. They live long. Those who laugh too loudly, too soon. They earn dislike. Those who do not laugh at all. They may be asked, "What grudge do you bear against the Count?" You once performed at a grand banquet. The hall was filled with every sort of person, from a duke with curls like springs to ladies with lips redder than a basket of tomatoes. You sang a light satire about the steward counts wine by the barrel, but counts debts by the drifting grain. You heard a soft giggle at the head table. A noblewoman hid her smile behind her fan. Mouth smiling, eyes not, husband unaware. Perfect. But across the hall, a young knight, a few drinks in, burst out with a booming "Ha!" loud as a festival cannon. Every head turned. The steward too. And from that day on, the knight's wine tasted thinner than cabbage water. You learned this. In such gatherings, the clever listener laughs in layers. First line, a light smile. Mid-verse, a slightly fuller laugh. Final punchline, a laugh just loud enough to show wit, but never longer than the laughter of the duke's nearest guest. You once saw a countess rehearse her laugh before a mirror. 2 tears of laughter. Just enough to appear charming. Not enough to invite gossip of being too much. You understand now. In feudal society, listeners were not passive. They were players in a game of laughter. And the rules changed each time a new figure entered the room. You once sang a Cervantes mocking a neighboring king. At first, the room laughed. Then, a messenger from that king entered. No one spoke. And from the next verse on, only spoons tapping bowls and polite coughs could be heard. You learned. A skilled listener can shift from laughter to solemnity in half a breath. You have also performed at village fairs. There, laughter comes easier, but still follows its own rhythm. The old laugh slowly. The young laugh fast, but only after checking who laughed first. Once you sang, "The plowman counts his cows with his fists, counts his wives with his toes." The elders laughed heartily. The young waited 3 beats, watching the old schoolmaster nod first. You smiled. Rules everywhere. You have seen laughter go wrong. A middle-aged gentleman at an elegant gathering. You sang, "The Count loves white horses, but often falls in sunny weather." He laughed too loudly, just as the Count rose with his goblet. After that, his seat edged closer to the door at each gathering. A polite way of saying, "Do not return." You understand now. Laughter at a performance is the audience's art of self-preservation. Laugh to show understanding. Do not laugh too soon, to avoid embarrassing the powerful. Do not laugh too long, to avoid seeming sycophantic. And never laugh before the powerful do, or you may be marked as scheming. You reflect. A wise listener is like a lute string, knowing when to tighten, when to loosen, when to resonate, and when to feign a broken string. You once ended a song, scanned the room, and saw clearly who laughed truly, who laughed out of duty, who did not laugh, knowing that laughter then would land them in someone's black book. You stepped down. An old gentleman approached, winked. You sang well, but I laughed even better. Was my timing good enough tonight? You replied, your laughter was like aged wine, warm enough to comfort, never strong enough to intoxicate. He smiled softly, and you knew, one more pleased listener, one more safe performance. You left. Night fell. The wind was cold. You thought, a singer must learn to laugh, but the audience must learn it even more. And you smiled into the dark, knowing tomorrow there would be another hall, another game of laughter, and you would still be the one counting beats more carefully than any musician counts time. Chapter 16. Laughter at a funeral. You might think, a funeral is a place of silence, where tears flow freely, where people exchange glances of sorrow, or pretend to. But for a troubadour like you, a funeral can be a small stage, where thin threads of laughter weave through mourning clothes. Of course, you would not sing a satire about the Count at the Count's funeral. You are not a fool, but you know, laughter at a funeral is an art. It reminds the living that they are still alive, and reminds the dead that they were not always so serious. You have performed at many funerals, not because you enjoy them, but because they pay better than weddings. Perhaps because, in mourning, everyone hopes the singer will at least stop the guests from leaving early. You remember one such occasion, the funeral of an old count. A man so stingy that on his deathbed, his final words were, "Do not bury me too deep, waste of land." You sang a light tune. Some grow rich, yet when they go, they hope to keep their keys in tow. But those who carry the casket care not. The hall held its breath for a beat. Then a soft, stifled laugh rose from the second row. Soon, quiet smiles followed, like dry leaves rustling in a gentle breeze. You knew you had struck the right tone. Not too bold, not too bland. You had learned from old Guihem. A funeral is where you laugh low, like a sneeze. Those who understand will laugh. Those who do not, let them be. You once saw a young troubadour who failed to learn this. He sang, "The Count preferred strong drink to sacred words," at the Count's funeral. There is no need to finish that tale. He fled the village that very night, with only his lute and a shattered reputation. You understand, laughter at a funeral is not mockery of the dead. It is relief for the living. Amid the thick air of wax, winding cloth, and dry grass on the floor, a well-placed line can help people breathe again. You remember the funeral of an old market woman. She was blunt, loud, and full of life in the crowded market. You sang, "Now she is gone, the market's bare, the bread goes hard, the fish less fair. The grocer's hands now steady show, the butcher dares not raise his price." Some laughed, some cried. But the laughter was kind, born of affection and memory, not malice. You know this well. Laughter at a funeral is not to disrupt the mood. It is to keep the mood from suffocating. You have even seen a royal funeral. There, no one dared laugh aloud. But you knew, a glance exchanged, a faint press of the lips. That too was laughter. You sang an old refrain. He lived like thunder in early spring, departed like rain at summer's end. No applause followed. But red-rimmed eyes met yours, and heads bowed. You knew you had done well. Sometimes, all it takes is a song not meant to provoke laughter, but afterward, someone pulls your sleeve and says, "Thank you, I thought I could not laugh today." That is the greatest reward, not gold, not sweet cakes, but a real smile in the heart's heaviest hour. You know this now. As a troubadour, you are not only a singer, you are one who holds a little light in the darkest hour of mourning. Guihem once told you, when you sing at a funeral, sing for the living, for the dead. Whether they hear or not is uncertain, but the living, if they can laugh, will carry that song longer than any tears. You hold this close. You finish your performance. The night is cold. Wind passes through the graveyard. You walk slowly. Loot on your back. A quiet warmth in your chest, like holding someone's hand on a winter's night. Because you know, today you brought a few smiles, among bowed heads, among clasped hands, among tear-filled eyes. You walk on, and think softly. Laughter at a funeral is no disgrace. It is a small farewell to the departed, and a gentle reminder to the living. There is still tomorrow, and still a reason to smile. Chapter 17. Satirizing war. Laughing when there is nothing left to lose. You might think a troubadour sings only of love, of roses, of moonlit nights and gentle breezes. No, not in this life. You have sung through times of endless war. Wars begun for reasons lost in the fog and ended with few left with enough teeth to tell the tale. In those days, no one wanted love songs. They wanted songs to make them forget burning homes, empty granaries, and tax letters from a king too busy hunting deer. You know this. Laughter in wartime is fragile, like a candle lit in a damp cellar. But if you can light it, it shines brighter than any torch. You once sang in a small village, a village liberated by two different armies in the same week. Homes burned, barns empty. Even the dogs had fled. The villagers sat by the fire, faces as flat as old bread left through 3 rainy seasons. You sang, "When our men came, the roosters crowed. When theirs arrived, the roosters fled." Now both have gone, no rooster returns. And we are leaving too. They laughed through tears, and still they laughed. Because laughing meant they were still alive. You understand. Satirizing war is not mocking soldiers. It is not mocking the dead. It is reminding the living they still have the right to laugh at their suffering. You once sang. The War Council met for 3 long days, and in the end, flew the wrong flag. That song was banned in 2 cities. But in taverns, they requested it 3 times in a night. For in war, the foolishness of rulers is the most beloved joke. You remember old Guihem saying, "Laughter will not save lives in war, but it helps one carry water without trembling." You know he was right. You once sang for a group of wall guards. They were tired, hungry, half had colds. You sang, "The enemy's arrows fall like rain. Our helmets catch them like garden pots. In the morning, we collect their arrows. By evening, we roast fish." The soldiers laughed until their chests ached. One laughed so hard his cough worsened. But they thanked you, because laughter was the one thing not taken by their commanders after roll call. You also sang in a field hospital. There, laughter was needed most. When you no longer have the arms or legs to clap along, a cheerful line is life's gentle pat on your back. You sang, "War as long as the wife's hair. The husband gone for years, now returned, bald as an egg. She smiles. Less money for combs." They laughed, softly, but with tears. You know, satirizing war is not to make people forget it. It is to help them face it, without despair. You once sang at a soldier's funeral. They told you, "Do not sing too sadly. The living still need to eat supper." You sang, "He fell before his last breath. Boots still new, helmet still clean. The next man took them, put them on, and marched to sing for the captain." They laughed, then wept again. But that laughter helped them swallow their evening broth. You understand. The old laugh to forget war, the young laugh to fight fear. Those who have lost loved ones laugh to remind themselves that living on is also a kind of victory. You once asked Guihem, "Is there ever a time not to satirize war?" He said, "Yes, when the enemy is seated just behind you." You took that to heart, and you learned when to laugh aloud, when to let laughter live only in song, not on your face, and when silence is wisest. You have sung through many such nights. They paid you with bread, cured meat, wine, and a warm nod worth more than a wool cloak. You know, in war, laughter is a weapon no one bans, no one confiscates. And if you laugh well enough, it keeps you alive longer than steel. Tonight, you sing again. A song half sad, half wry. They listen and laugh. You smile with them, because you know. As long as they laugh at war, war has not yet won. Chapter 18. Laughter and Sex. When does a song become indecent? You might think that songs about sex in the Middle Ages were something people avoided, a strict taboo. Not quite. They sang about it, more than you might imagine. But the question was this: when is a sensual song clever, and when is it simply indecent? That is where the line is as thin as the edge of a cracked clay teacup. You have sung every sort of song. Some used blooming flowers, flowing rivers, singing birds to speak of things you knew full well were not flowers, not rivers, not birds. Some spoke plainly, so plainly that the nearby church bell rang 3 times in protest. You have learned, in the art of singing about sex, layers of meaning are everything. The more layers you can weave, the more your song is safe to sing. If you cannot, by tomorrow the monastery's blacklist will include your name. You remember once singing "The Village Girl and the Honey Barrel." It included, "He came by, asked polite questions, his hand held a broom, his eyes glanced at the squash vine, but his heart was sweeter than honey." The whole tavern laughed. An old man slapped the table. "Holding a broom won't sweep away those cobwebs." You knew then. That song was still safe, wrapped in metaphor, enough for an old priest to let it pass. But once, a young troubadour sang, "Waiting for him beneath the mulberry tree," and sang, "She picked mulberries with both hands." He sat behind, teaching her how. That was too much. The crowd laughed, but a priest rose and growled, "An indecent, corrupting song." The troubadour was thrown out of the fair, his lute confiscated, and he lost his red hair ribbon, which he prized more than money. You learned another truth. The line is fragile. One word, one note, one glance can tip a song from clever to crude. You once asked Goyhem, "Master, how can I tell when a song about sex is clever and when it is indecent?" He smirked. "When the singer stays composed, when the listener blushes in the cheeks, not the ears, and when, after the song, someone still invites you to supper." You carved that deep into your memory. You once sang "Her Night Beneath the Eaves," a song suggestive, but just enough. A tale of 2 meeting beneath the eaves in the rain. It ended. Rain wet his coat, and her hair. They walked home before the skies cleared. But their hearts had already... You paused. You let the audience fill the silence. That is how you keep a song in the safe zone. You let them laugh, blush, murmur, but leave no clear line for complaint. Once, you foolishly sang a bolder song in a tavern full of the bishop's men. You barely reached. He came to her at midnight. Together they compared lutes. A priest shouted, "Comparing lutes at that hour?" You smiled thinly, lowered your lute, and bowed. Indeed, the tuning was not quite right. You salvaged the moment. But since then, you remember. Some taverns welcome words. Others, only wordless melodies. You know this well. Audiences love clever, sensual songs, but the powerful do not. Why? Because power fears what makes people laugh at hypocrisy. Fears laughter that reminds them they are human. And fears most the laughter about what all desire, but few admit. You leave such performances knowing this. You write 2 versions of each song. One for fairs and taverns. One for castles where the bishop sits at the head table. You also learn when to pause, when to suggest, so none can claim offense. That is art, and instinct for survival. You know, when singing about sex, laughter is the finest garment a song can wear. When they laugh, they stop watching too closely. But if they blush without laughing, best to change the song. Perhaps one about hens. You once told a young troubadour, if your song about sex makes them laugh as if they've sipped fine wine, you've done well. If they laugh while glancing around, you've been foolish. You step out of the tavern. The night is cold with mist. You know, tomorrow, someone will surely ask again, Sing the song about her beneath the eaves, and you will. And once more pause at, but their hearts had already. Because you know well, between a song and being called indecent, there lies only a single breath. You smile in the night. Because in this world of forbidding rules, clever laughter still says the most, without saying a thing. Chapter 19. In the end, laughter forgotten. You might think, laughter is immortal. As long as people gather by firelight, meet in taverns, love and hate, they will laugh. But no, not always. You, a troubadour older than the coat you wear, have seen otherwise. There was a time when laughter rang everywhere. In castles, at markets, in taverns, at weddings, even at funerals. You once sang sharp serventes, mocking greedy counts, teasing fat bishops, jesting about knights who rode horses no steadier than their wives rode them. People laughed, and you lived on that laughter. But then, the winds shifted. You remember the year when the church grew stronger. Songs were censored, laughter rewritten as confessions. You once performed at a fair. The song Four Wives of the Old Count was beloved. You had barely begun. The first loved gold, the second her mirror, the third her wine, the fourth, the young page. Before the laughter could rise, a young friar stood and said, "This song corrupts the faithful." You knew then. The air had turned cold. The old jokes would soon vanish. You retreated to smaller taverns, to more distant villages. But the ban on such songs spread faster than galloping horses. You saw it happen to your peers. One jailed for singing. The Lord has no need for gold, but needs honest keepers of it. One exiled for mocking a bishop's gambling. One silenced forever, not by illness, but by a jest that angered a powerful lady. You learned. There was a time when laughter meant wit, but when people feared wit, laughter became sin. You shifted to gentler songs, about flowers, moons, harvests, fish in streams. Safe, but dull. The audience applauded, but few laughed. And when they did, it was laughter permitted. As if laughter now required a license, you were saddened, but saw no other path. Old satirical songbooks were burned. Some were hidden. You once saw old Guyhem, hands trembling, copying The Princess and the Crooked Scales. He hid it deep in a chest. "So someone may remember and laugh one day," he said. You nodded. You knew. Nothing frightens the powerful more than clever laughter. A foolish law? People find a way around it. A heavy tax? They evade it. But a well-placed joke? It pierces the armor of pride. And they fear that more than weapons. You grew older. You sang less each year. You sang old funny tales for children, but skipped the dangerous lines. You sang in small taverns, where listeners were too poor to fear for their reputations. One night, a young singer came, a fine lute player, a strong voice. He asked, "Master, why do so few sing funny songs now? Didn't troubadours once mock the mighty?" You looked at him and smiled. Because once, people could laugh at themselves. Now they only want to laugh at others, and they hate being laughed at. He fell silent. You knew, such truths are bitter, but you also knew. Laughter forgotten does not mean laughter is dead. It lies somewhere still. In the minds of old singers, in secret songbooks, in the hearts of those brave enough to laugh when no one dares. You sat in a tavern, rain outside. You sipped your wine, watching the small fire, and softly sang, "One day, when laughter returns, I will sing loud enough to crack the ceiling with joy." You knew you might not live to see that day, but you believed, once a laugh has been heard, it is not so easily buried. You smiled and drifted to sleep by the fire. In your dreams, you sang the old song again and saw them laughing, laughing from the heart. Chapter 20. Epilogue. And yet, somehow, they endured. And so will you. You have followed me through 20 chapters, listening to tales of those who carried lutes, wandering across the land, where laughter was not a pastime. It was a trade, a shield, a meal. And now, as the night grows late, we turn the final page of this tale. You see, it is always the same. Laughter is the first thing doubted, and the last thing remembered. There were days when laughter filled the fairs, and days when it barely whispered behind a small cup of wine. You might think, those satirical songs, those suggestive verses, those sharp-edged jests, surely they would be forgotten, banned, rewritten. And you would be right. Some have been forgotten, some burned. Some remain in the memories of the old, like Guihem, whom I once told you about. He once said, "No song truly dies. Only the singers grow too afraid to sing." You know, even if troubadours vanish, that spirit lingers. In stories by the fire, in teasing among friends, in glances shared across a formal banquet. One lesson stays with you for life. Some days you sing a song and get paid. Some days you sing and pay a price. But as long as you dare to sing, you are still yourself. You once ended a night at a small tavern by the woods. Your audience, a few old woodcutters, some weavers, a handful of restless young men. You sang an old song. When laughter fades, the fields will grow pale. The winds will fall silent, and hearts will turn to stone. When you finished, an old man tapped his cup slowly. "That is true, so we laugh still. Though this year we lost half our grain, though the tax man comes next week, we laugh first, we will worry after." You nodded. That sip of wine was warmer than any word of comfort. You reflected. People need laughter like trees need sun. Without it, they may survive, but not thrive. You have seen many kinds of laughter. Bitter laughter, laughter from the heart, laughter to mask fear, and laughter when there is nothing left to lose. Each one matters, because each proves the heart still beats, and that a spirit can ache without surrendering. You sat quietly in the night, remembering old verses, songs never written down, only passed by word of mouth, tunes played with no audience, smiles shared when no one thought they could still smile. You know, every age fears laughter. It strips the varnish from their faces, it reveals the false and the hollow. Yet you also know, every age has those who will not fear singing, or teasing, or laughing. They may not be troubadours, they may be a village girl mocking the pompous mayor, an old woodcutter uttering one line that makes everyone blush, a child mimicking a count's grand walk behind his back, and so laughter lives on, like an underground stream, hidden, but never dry. You sigh, knowing that for a troubadour, laughter is not an inheritance on parchment. It is a mark left in the hearts of those who listen. You strum one last quiet line. "One day when I no longer sing, others will. Some better, some worse. But as long as they laugh, I am not truly gone." You know this. And tonight, as this story closes, you, the one listening, now carry a little of that flame. Tomorrow you might laugh at an old line in a book, or chuckle at a song that dares to mock the mighty, or smile alone, recalling a foolish song from childhood. That is enough, because as long as you laugh, there is still room in this world for those who know how to sing. And yet somehow they endured, and so will you. Good night. And now, as the songs have faded, and the last traces of laughter flicker in your mind like a small flame at the end of the night, you may let your shoulders soften a little more. Release your arms gently, and allow your eyes to close, if they have not already done so. You have walked with me through old melodies, through laughter both sweet and sharp, bitter as wine left too long. But it is laughter like this that helped people carry on, through the coldest days, through years of war and hunger. And perhaps, tonight, it will help you too, through a long day, or through a restless night. If this evening's journey brought you a bit of warmth, a bit of joy, or simply left you feeling a little lighter, I would be glad if you left me a small comment below. Share where you are listening from. Tell me what time it is for you, and which moment of laughter stayed with you tonight. And if you wish to join me again on future journeys, on other nights, with other tales, you are welcome to subscribe and turn on the small bell beside it. So when I tell the next story, you will not miss it. Now, let the last glow of the fire fade behind your closed eyes. Let the final notes of the lute settle within you like a thin wisp of smoke. And let your mind grow light and still. And yet somehow they endured, and so will you, and may you sleep deeply. Good night.